I'm Charlie Noyes. I serve as the town's emergency management director. And I've been doing, well, I have a long history in Bourne. Some of you have heard my story before, so I'll tell you it again. But first came into Bourne in '72, got out of the Air Force, joined the Bourne Police Department, was with the Bourne Police Department for 25 years, left there, went to Oxford, Massachusetts, became as chief of police in Oxford. I retired from Oxford Police Department in 2007, moved back to Bourne, live in Monument Beach. 2010, I got appointed to the position of emergency management director, which coincidentally I did before I left Bourne back in the 80s and 90s. So I've been doing that since 2010, roughly. I've been reestablished as the emergency management director. One of the things that we've been working on through emergency management, but also your local emergency planning committee, is working on what's called the Bourne Hazard Mitigation Plan. And what is the hazard mitigation plan? Basically, it's where the town looks at all of its properties, all of its infrastructure, its roadways, its buildings, its docks, its road culverts, bridges, and we look at what might happen to them if some type of natural event occurs. The man-made events, I mean, if we went to a war and somebody blew up a bridge, well, then you deal with that. But we look at the natural events that might occur. Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, tsunamis, wildland fires, anything that might destroy official town of Bourne property or what's called critical infrastructure. What's critical infrastructure? The Buzzards Bay Water District and the pumping stations that pump the water out of the ground and put up in the tank and then go down to the line. The Bourne Water District, the North Sagamore Water District, those are critical infrastructures. Some things that we have no control over is one of our infamous highway bridges, either the Bourne or Sagamore Bridge. We have no real control over what happens to them other than through our federal taxes. It wouldn't be our responsibility to replace them or repair them. That Uncle Sam's going to do that. But we look at how, if those bridges were to be damaged and become unusable, what's our alternative to get across the bridge from one side to the other, and how is that going to affect on the roadways and traffic and those bridges out there that might be destroyed, or the ramps leading up to the bridges. A while ago, probably 2 months ago now, we started in conjunction with the Cape Cod Commission. Our local emergency planning committee started to look at our hazard mitigation plan and identify those hazards, both real and perceived, that occur in town. And there was a survey done. It was available online, as well as there was one on paper form that people could do and fill out to find out what everyone's inference on disasters were. So we did a survey, and roughly 200 people participated in the survey. I'll try to get out of the way. And we asked, first thing we asked, one of the things we asked was, are you a year-round resident, part-time resident? Do you own a home? Do you rent? You're not a resident or own a business? And the graph up there shows that the majority of people, roughly 80% of the respondents, were year-round residents and live in town. And we asked if you ever had experienced a disaster or weather-related event while living, working, or visiting in Bourne. Majority again, 80% were yes. And then we asked, which of the events have you experienced while living here? Coastal erosion, dam failure, there's about 1/2 of 1% up there. A drought, earthquake, that was interesting. Fire, floods, hurricanes, pretty much we've all been through hurricanes. Landslides, unless you live up on the bluffs in Sagamore Beach, you probably don't worry about landslides because it's not going to affect any of us. Nor'easters, I mean, we've had enough of them. I guess we're going to have one this weekend, but unfortunately it's warm, so it'll just be wet. But we've all been through the winter nor'easters. High winds, we go through high winds all the time. Lightning, thunderstorms, tornadoes, extreme cold or heat. Tornado, we had one tornado back in the 80s, early 90s, I believe it was, and it landed off of Sagamore Beach, came down off the beach and hit the water, and everybody that was swimming out there was in July or August or something like that. And so we've had a tornado, extreme cold and heat, winter storms. Of course, we all have been through that. Tsunami, there's half of 1% maybe, or 1% at the most. The last one was a long time ago when it did a little bit of water rise, and there was one even more recently that had the water rise maybe a couple inches off of Nantucket for an earthquake that occurred the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, underwater. Sea level rise, people have some interest or felt they've experienced that. Maybe they've lost some frontage along their waterfront property, and they've lost some of their beach and other things, and who knows what that is. One of the things then we looked at is the historical data. Coastal erosion and shorelines change. The weather data is, yes, that's something that we've dealt with in the past and we're going to have to continue to deal with. Did we feel like the planning team, which is 8 of us, did we feel like there was that's something that could happen in Bourne? We said yes. And just by our own personal history and knowledge of what has happened, and like I mentioned a minute ago, people have lost some of their waterfront shoreline and their beachfront in front of their house. They've had to do something to their docks. They've had to raise the pilings that their docks are on simply because of the water. Dam or culvert failure. Anybody know how many dams there are in town? Other than that nasty neighbor of yours, but not him or her. But there are 4 dams in town that we've got history on, and that we have statistics on, or not statistics, but we have to consider in our plan. Up at in Bournedale, where Herring Pond drains down through the Herring Run, and it comes down and then eventually runs into the canal. There's on the Mill Pond Dam, right there by the 700 block of County Road, right where, if you're driving down County Road, if you're driving from north to Miami Beach to Pecasset, just before you get the traffic light. Okay, if you're headed towards the traffic light from Miami Beach, on the right-hand side, there's a pond there. Just the other side of that, there's a dam. Once upon a time, there was a mill there. We looked at that. If that dam breaks, no big deal. The water just rushes out into the salt marsh, and it's not going to cause any concern or worry to anyone there. The Bournedale one, a little bit of concern because there are some houses that are close by, and if the dam fails enough, it could either damage the roadway and or damage right up to the house itself. Red Brook Pond, right where the pond down in Shore Road, in between Kingman, not Kingman, Katomet Boatyard and the Kingman Marina, Katomet Boatyard, right where the Herring Run runs through there also. The pond there that's always got a couple swans on it. There's a dam there. If that fails, the water could drain out of the pond there. Really, it's not going to affect any property, any homes, or any businesses that way. So they're there. The dams are there. Earthquake. We're not really an earthquake-prone zone. Every now and then we hear of one that happens up in New Hampshire. We hear of one that happens in Pennsylvania or New York State. Every once in a while we feel something in the ground here. Last year or the year before, I was out in the yard and I felt it. I felt, something happened and felt something strange, and I called up the Mass Emergency Management and I says, did we just have an earthquake? And they said, yeah, you did. And I said, okay, no big deal. Nothing rattled, nothing shook, nothing fell off the shelves, but the possibility is there. We have to keep it in the back of our minds, but there's really no big planning for it. Fire. Now they call it, the fire department can deal with building fires, that's not an issue. Now the plan is, and part of our hazard mitigation plan is what they call wildland fires. And the wildland fire is a fire that starts in the woods and bumps into houses, bumps into a development. A long time ago, there was only places we had forests in town, where the town forest, Miami Beach, Pecasset, up in Bournedale, and of course the base. But now we see more and more houses have been built into those areas. Monument Beach, where Valley Bar Road is, where Terra Terrace is, where some of the other streets in there. That all used to be woodland, and there was a big forest fire back there in the 80s, early 80s, that went through there. If all those houses were there back then, they would have been burnt. So now there's planning on how do we prevent wildland fires from bumping into the neighborhoods and or the individual houses that are out in the woods. Probably the only real flood we have to worry about here is the one that's going to come from the water inland, and that's going to inundate our neighborhoods, our streets, and do that. So these are all things that we take in consideration. There's a bunch of other ones here. Landslides, hurricanes and tropical storms, of course, nor'easters, high winds, thunderstorms, extreme temperatures. Mostly heat isn't a real extreme problem that we have to concern about here. Last year we had some warm days, but most of the time it cools off at nighttime. It's not like we're going to go for a 3-4 day stretch of 100-degree weather and not have some cooling off at nighttime. So, in the middle of the afternoon it might be real hot, and people may have to take into consideration what they're going to do to protect themselves and their family by not exposing themselves to the heat. Cold weather, as long as the heat in the house is on and electricity is on, we're pretty well set. We'll say okay if we stay inside and out of harm's way. Drought, past couple seasons we've had to be concerned about that. We didn't get into any real severe weather restrictions, but the possibility always exists. So our hazard planning always has to say, what will we do if? So then we looked at all of those things I just mentioned quickly, and here on the chance, is there a possibility, or is it likely that one of these things are going to happen? Is it a possibility, or is it very likely, highly likely that these things are going to happen? So we looked at all those, and we saw that a drought is possible, tsunami is unlikely, urban fires are likely, dam or culvert failure is possible, earthquake is possible, coastal erosion and shoreline change is highly likely that's going to happen. Whether or not it happens in my lifetime that I'm going to have to worry about it, but probably grandkids and other, are going to have to worry about it, have to deal with it more than we are going to have to deal with it, our generations. So we looked at those things and we identified those objects that are of some consequence that we really need to plan for. And these are the ones we really looked at: coastal erosion, a flood, mostly seaborne, hurricanes, nor'easters, high winds, severe winter weather, and sea level rise. And the ones that, of that list that is of extreme consequence and really need to do plan: the nor'easters, the high winds, severe winter weather, and of course the hurricanes and tropical storms are in there too. So we're working on that, doing those plans. And a vulnerability assessment I mentioned before. What are some of our essential facilities that we have to make sure that we take extra steps, extra plans for to protect ourselves? Facilities, we looked at public facilities, of course the police station, which eventually will be over there, high and dry. But the Main Street Fire Station, the Bourne Fire Station, that's mislabeled, that should be the Monument Beach Fire Station, Pecasset Fire Station, Bourne Town Hall, the Community Building, the Jonathan Bourne Public Library off of Sandwich Road, and the Bourne Housing Authority facilities, both here in Buzzards Bay, down in Pecasset at 871 Shore Road. Transportation facilities, so our hazard mitigation plan, we looked at all these streets. We looked at the rotaries, the Memorial Circle, the Belmont Rotary, Taylor Point Marina, the Miami Beach Marina. All of these are public properties or facilities that if something were to happen, then the town of Bourne is going to be on the stick to repair and or replace those things post-event. And the overpasses, I mean, the Pecasset River Bridge. I mean, if that was gone, the only way from Monument Beach towards Pecasset would be a county road. Same thing with the Shore Road overpass down by Shipyard Lane, down in Pecasset and Shore Road, right there by the entrance to Kingman Marina. So we looked at all those. Salt Marsh Lane, I was down in Salt Marsh Lane the other day because we talked about the culvert out there. And while I was out there, the marsh, it's a dirt section of Salt Marsh Lane at the very end down by Barlow's Landing Beach. The culvert has been replaced in the past. The salt marsh had drained out. It was low tide. I happened to go down there, and the salt marsh was drained out. But a resident came out there and said, stopped me and said, "I'm glad you're here." And he said, I just want to mention to somebody that it seems like the drain's plugged because it really doesn't drain properly and takes too long to drain out. And during an event, a storm of any type, if that drain was plugged and working slower than normal than it should, it's only going to cause it to wash over, and the culvert's going to fail and it's going to wash the roadway out. There's about 6 or 8 houses at the very end of Salt Marsh Lane on a little cul-de-sac that are out there. A lot of them are seasonal. They're not. I think only half of them are, maybe a third of them are year-round homes. So we looked at that. And what is called lifeline utilities, the pump stations for the water districts, both North Sagamore, the Buzzards Bay Water District. They have 2 of them, 2 pump stations. They also have the sewer system here in Buzzards Bay. There's a pump station down behind the fire station on Main Street, and there's another pumping station up by Hideaway Village on Head of the Bay Road. So if those were to be damaged or destroyed due to some type of event, going to cause problems for a lot of people down here on Buzzards Bay. So when we looked at all those things, what we said we need to develop some mitigation goals. The last time the town looked at their hazard mitigation plan was in 2004, and by law, technically we're supposed to do it every 5 years. So we're behind the 8 ball on that one. So in 2004 we did that, and what was our goals for our hazard mitigation plan? As it says on the slide there, reduce the loss of life, property, and infrastructure. Coordinate our hazard mitigation plan with that of other towns in the county, as well as in Plymouth County, because we butt up against the Plymouth County and Wareham. Seek and take advantage of funding opportunities. Whenever there's funding opportunities, look at the Conservation Commission in particular and the Natural Resources, look at what can be done to maybe improve our marina facilities, our waterside facilities, to prevent them from being damaged or destroyed in the future by not making the same mistake twice. Same way now as if your house gets destroyed because of a hurricane and you live on the water, you can't rebuild it the way it was. You're going to have one of these houses that's stuck up in the air because the first floor is nothing other than a wall, supporting wall, and it has to be the type of wall that's going to let water pass through and underneath and all those things. So those things that are hazard mitigation, so the same thing doesn't happen twice to that house. It might get destroyed once. Next time that same type of event or storm comes along, it's not going to be destroyed. The water is just going to run through it or by it or around it. And inform the public, distribute awareness information, doing that. So that's something that we're all working on right now to try to reduce the opportunities or the severity of any events, mostly natural events, that might occur that will damage or destroy public property. We didn't look at how we're going to protect your house or individual businesses. That's up to the individual homeowner and business. But our charge was to look at how we're going to protect town of Bourne structures and that are critical to the town itself, as well as to get around from point A to point B. We looked at our bridges, looked at our underpasses, overpasses. We looked at our lifeline utilities, our electricity, our water, our sewer, and we're in the final process of doing that. And 2004, it was about a 15-page locally produced document about that thick was our hazard mitigation plan. The next one, the one that's going to come out now, is about yay thick, and a lot more information in there, a lot more words in there. I don't know if there's going to be a lot more information, but a lot more words in there, and it's a lot prettier document. But we're producing that. That's going to get produced in cooperation with the Cape Cod Commission. So other than the local officials' time and energy involved in providing information to the project, it's really not going to cost the town of Bourne anything to do this. And one of the things it does, that when we have a hazard mitigation plan, it opens up the opportunity for us to go out and seek federal funds to either to prevent things from happening, or retrofit a building or structure or dock or waterfront so it doesn't happen again. So that's what we're up to right now. That's our hazard mitigation plan. And anybody have any questions?
Was the culvert blocked?
Yes, it was blocked. As a matter of fact, I called George Sala up, the DPW superintendent, and said, George, and told him what was going on. And so he went out there later that afternoon, and sure enough, it was plugged up somewhat, and so they cleaned it out. But it will get filled in again. Eventually, ideally, it's a bigger culvert, but when you put in a bigger culvert that will never get plugged, you're going to have a big hump in the road. And now you'd have to change the whole roadway approach to it. So it's one of those things that at the end of Saltmarsh Lane, there's one of the houses out there is post damaged, and it's way up in the air. It's, the living quarters is on the second floor, what would be a normal second floor, and the first floor is nothing but walls to hold up the main house, and so water can flow through it and around it and not knock it down. There's not much we can do until an event came along, and if all of those houses were destroyed out there, there would have to be either the government would buy up the properties from the homeowners and or not allow them to rebuild out there. And that's hard if you've had a family house out there for generations, and now because of a hurricane that comes through in 2017 destroys your house, you're told you can't rebuild out there because it's, no one's going to give you the money to do that. The problem is a lot of times that, if I've got my own $500,000 and I want to build a summer cottage out there, I can do it at my risk. But I'm not going to get any money. I'm not going to get a loan from the bank. No one's going to give me an insurance policy on it. But if I've got $500,000, I want to build a fancy house out there. So I would have said a $100,000 house, but nobody builds $100,000 houses anymore. One of the, kind of on the side to that, is one of the things that there's this book that the Federal Emergency Management puts out. It's called Are You Ready? And like I say, it's pretty much discusses everything and all of these hazards that might come along. And because it's the federal government and it's our tax dollars, you can get one of these for free. And all you have to do is, they won't send them to me. I can't order up 100 of them for the people in the town of Bourne. But take a piece of paper, it's got an 800 number, you call them and they'll mail you one. I also brought along the newest flyer from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. And it basically has a little bit of all the other individual flyers and programs that are out there and talks about them all as to be informed, have a plan, be ready for what might come along. So, the other thing, how many of you know which hurricane evacuation zone you live in?
The worst one.
The worst one, okay. Surprisingly, a lot of people are in what's called Hurricane Evacuation Zone A. A lot of the people in Bourne are in Hurricane Evacuation Zone A because not necessarily your house is going to get flooded out, but all the roads leading up to your house are going to get flooded. Vast majority of people in Bourne, pretty much everybody from County Road towards the water, everybody in Buzzards Bay from the bypass towards the canal and the bay, you're in a hurricane evacuation zone A. Sagamore Beach, you're all set. Bournedale, you're all set. But everybody on that side of the canal, on the south side of the canal, Cape side of the canal, if you live from County Road towards the canal, you're in hurricane evacuation zone A. There's even some people on the inland side towards the base, towards MacArthur Boulevard of County Road, that are in that hurricane evacuation zone A, simply because your roads might be cut off. Your house will be dry, but as long as you're all set staying home, you're fine. But when they say everybody who lives in hurricane evacuation zone A should evacuate, you make your own decision whether you're going to stay or go. And just hopefully with the knowledge that if you found out, you're in hurricane evacuation zone A, that you're not going to be able to travel if the scenario becomes as bad as predicted. So if you say, I can stay home, I've got food, I've got a generator, I've got everything I need to live for 3 days before the troops come over the hill, as I say, to rescue us, you're okay. But on that, if you have somebody in your family, in your household that has a medical condition, and you're concerned about that they need daily care or need some type of treatment daily, or might need to get to a hospital, it's best that you go someplace, because you may not be able to go there during the storm, during the event, or the next day. So, and there's a good way that you can go online and you can look up, you put in your address through the Mass Emergency Management Agency, the Know Your Zone, and it will tell you, you put in 123 County Road and it will tell you what zone you're in. You can put in 854 County Road and it will tell you what zone you live in. Historically, when Pilgrim was built, back when it was built, the plan was they drew a 10-mile circle around it and said everybody inside the 10-mile circle has to have a plan. The community has to have a plan what's going to happen if something bad happens at Pilgrim. Back at that time when they drew that 10-mile circle, there was about 3 houses right across the town line in Bourne, in North Sagamore, that were there, but the state and federal government said that 3 houses, we're not going to worry about Bourne. So none of Bourne was in there. Now there's probably 50 to 60 houses inside that 10-mile circle. So it's a little different, but still they go, nah, Bourne doesn't have to do anything. So because that 10-mile circle is drawn around there, there's no need to worry. That's what the people say. But we look at, there's going to be a spontaneous concern and panic if something happens at Pilgrim, because of either overly cautious people with misinformation or lack of information. There's going to be a spontaneous evacuation, and people are going to try to get off the Cape or get out of Dodge and go someplace. And because there really is no plan for it, it's going to be difficult. And the first thing that's going to happen, that everybody who spontaneously tries to leave from Hyannis and Sandwich and Mashpee and Falmouth are going to run into roadblocks at the Sagamore Bridge, telling everybody that they can't go north, they got to come this way. And they all have to come down this way and get on 25 and go west somewhere. And people, you won't be able to go from this rotary here, the Belmont Rotary by the A-Frame Package Store, what was the A-Frame Package Store, called Bourne Bridge Liquors, I guess now. But that scenic highway is going to be blocked off, so you can't go up towards Sagamore Bridge from Buzzards Bay if something happens. But don't worry about it. A couple of years, the place will be closed down, and all the store and anything that's left over, bad chemicals and stuff like that, is supposed to be stored in what they call dry cask, big cement cask, probably half the size, well, the size of this half of the room, and the stuff is to be stored on the Pilgrim site. But we don't have to do any planning for it. So, thank you.